thank you very much. As I'm from the Methanol Institute, we're the global trade association for the methanol industry, and I'm pretty happy to be here today just to share with you some of our insights on one potential alternative fuel. So again, some names you may recognize in there. We're a four-tiered or multi-tiered organization, mainly producers at the top, but you can see the bulk of our membership is across technology providers, many of which are been working in advanced fuels for decades. So in talking about methanol in a marine application, it's just important to keep in mind that it's the simplest molecule among the alcohols group. Many of you may have heard of ethanol, which is the one you can consume actually. Methanol is not, but with a single carbon atom, it's highly oxygenated and it's laden with hydrogen. So it's probably the most efficient hydrogen carrier out of all the molecules out there to date, as hydrogen in a non-separated form. The methanol market is broadly divided between petrochemicals, resins, glues. It's a petrochemical feedstock, but it's also been involved in the fuel sector for, again, many years. The lower right, this is a M100 vehicle. Recently, China has adopted policy paper 61, to name it, which is lending quite a big support to the development of methanol as a fuel within the transportation network. Upper left and upper right, those are methanol fuel cell vehicles as well, Class 8 trucks, and it's extensively used in the industrial boiler market as well as cooking stoves in China. So these are already multi-million ton markets on their own. Inside of China, methanol is produced predominantly from coal. Outside China, from natural gas. But there is a growing market for renewable methanol, and this is being led by demand from the downstream derivatives markets for such things as even toothpaste, lampshades, clothing. Many of these manufacturers are also looking to lower their carbon footprint, and as a result, they're demanding lower carbon feedstocks as a result. And this is also important to note because as we move forward, we can already see in many countries renewables, mainly solar and land-based wind, have already reached the tipping point with respect to coal and natural gas, meaning they're cheaper to produce than coal or natural gas power. And drawing your attention to the upper right on this kind of process flow, this is commonly referred to as power to X or electrofuels. This is where you would combine hydrogen with carbon, and it's broadly accepted globally that if we are to meet this limit of world temperatures not increasing by more than 2 degrees Celsius, that we will indeed need to incorporate some form of carbon capture, because we just will not be able to produce advanced fuels, or clean fuels, or zero carbon fuels at scale and fast enough for us to meet these requirements. Methanol can also be produced in a renewable way through fermentation, which has been done for centuries, but also gasification, which is also quite popular, I guess I would say. And in this respect, we're moving towards more of a circular economy, where we're using a liquid, or in this case, methanol, to capture renewable power. Renewable power is difficult to store. Energy in general, or electricity, is difficult to store. Currently, it's mainly only battery power is available. But in using a liquid, again, it provides a means to then move it efficiently, as well as reform it to fuels or other potential uses. And by setting up this type of a platform, you can then begin to include other waste streams, such as waste CO2 or biosyn gas, or even pure hydrogen into this format. We like liquids because they're just more efficient. Batteries have a limited discharge time, whereas again, working with a liquid fueling fuel cell perhaps can prolong the power and extend the range of whatever application we're in question. Just touch base on this briefly. We have a lot of experience in the automobile and heavy equipment industry. These are a few examples of methanol being used where, for example, ethanol or E5 blending requirements are not able to be met, such as in Italy or China. We have found independently that in most cases this E5 is not actually E5, it's more like E1, 2, and the balance being taken up by methanol because it's cheaper and it's even more efficient than methanol, providing the same emissions benefits. This is another example of this type of high innovation technology going into, this is a Gigli Dakar rally vehicle, which they placed just outside the top 10 this year in the Dakar rally. But this technology gets filtered down into the passenger car markets, the heavy duty applications, and as well into the marine sector. I mentioned a little bit about this. We work with governments to provide them with adequate tools to enable them to include and expand the use of methanol in fuels. Recently, the Worldwide Fuel Charter allowed, I would say, the inclusion of new language in the 6th edition to highlight methanol in the EN 228 inclusion for gasoline in Europe. And coming to the marine fuels, because of the proliferation of methanol in the broader markets, petrochemical markets, we can see that it's widely available already. So when we talk about whether or not it could be available in a marine context, we can clearly say that it is. In fact, we recently conducted an independent study and we determined that methanol was already available at many ports, in fact over 100 ports globally. It's important to note that methanol, the interim guidelines for using it as a marine fuel were approved in September, just 2 months ago this year. It will be officially approved at the Marine Safety Committee's 102nd session in June, or by June of next year. And interesting, next on the agenda are fuel cells. So that's, again, an application that is being considered as we move more into advanced fuels. So. It's important to keep in mind that the IMO strategy includes what's referred to as levels of ambition combined with guidelines. So I mentioned the interim guidelines for methanol as a marine fuel have been approved in September. But you can see that the levels of ambition are all around carbon intensity as well as greenhouse gas emissions, of which there are 6 types. This legislation has also incentivized us to move forward with a number of pilot projects. So at the moment we have probably the most well-known, I guess, or understood is in the tanker segment. We have 11 vessels currently trading with 1 more to be delivered in December and another 4 on order for next year. Bunkering methanol is quite straightforward. We've already begun an exercise with a classification society to put together bunkering guidelines as a technical reference. But it's quite similar to bunkering, I would say, distillate, where you're managing evaporation. We use nitrogen blanketing as well as temperature on both sides of the flange. And it's quite safe. I mean, methanol has been involved in performance sports or automotive sports, drag racing, power boat racing, rally, and Formula One. And you can see this isn't to read, but just to demonstrate that it's not more dangerous than gasoline or diesel. I was going to talk a little bit about hydrogen, but I don't think I'll have much time. We also work in many of these applications mainly connected with fuel cells. It's important to note that handling and storing hydrogen, which is a gas that many governments and organizations are trying to work towards, to move towards, is difficult. It requires a lot of space. It requires completely different material compatibility issues, and as such, methanol is widely seen as probably a better carrier in this respect. And in a marine application, we have this type of technology where the methanol is reformed on board alongside the application itself, whether it's a fuel cell or it's a direct injection into, say, a distillate. So we have this experience as well, which can provide immediate benefits such as fuel savings. I will skip this. Methanol is miscible in water. Again, it's not only safe in an industrial setting, but it's quite safe for the environment. Recently, CEN, the European Standardization Committee, as well as SED out of Sweden, have begun creating methanol bunkering guidelines for the Arctic, as methanol is considered perhaps an optimal fuel for the Arctic. I will, I think, stop there with 30 seconds left, but I've included a few more slides which you can refer to once they're handed back. So, thank you very much.